Customers Matter is a podcast about customer-centred, omni-channel marketing in an age of digital disruption, mobility, and the Internet of Things. It's hosted by John O'Neill, a management consultant and founding owner of Commotion, an agency specialising in customer experience design and delivery.
So I'm super delighted to be in Sydney this afternoon with Deborra-lee Furness, the internationally acclaimed actress and passionate supporter of children and defender of their human rights across the globe. Deb and her actor husband Hugh Jackman have travelled to Africa, Asia and South America and seen up close the plight of literally hundreds of thousands, in fact millions of children around the world without permanent loving families, and they set out to do something about it. Deborra-lee is the founder of not one, but two not-for-profit organisations devoted to creating a better future for children in need, Adopt Change in Australia and Hoagland in the United States. I should declare I've had the privilege and pleasure of being on the journey with Deb in Australia for the last 7 years as a fellow director of Adopt Change. And knowing you as I do, Deb, it occurs to me that we could describe you as the accidental social entrepreneur. Is that fair?
I love that you call me the accidental social entrepreneur because it's totally what it is. Because, well, as you know, my journey with this whole issue began as a knee-jerk reaction to something that I read in the paper about a woman who had adopted a child in China and couldn't bring her back. And I just remember feeling so incensed that there's a child that could have a loving family, and because of bureaucracy, it wasn't happening. And so I remember that day I wrote down, drop off dry cleaning and ring the Sydney Morning Herald, which is exactly what I did. And then after that, we got the editor's editorial, the front page, and they said Deborra-lee and her Action Lobby Group. And I was like, where would they be? And basically, as soon as I realised how under the rug that issue had been for so many years, because so many people contacted me after and said, please keep talking, please say something because it hasn't been talked about. Therein began my journey. And when I first started speaking out, I used the wrong syntax. I'm sure I said the wrong things. And I had many people coming at me from every which way, including the anti-adoption culture, which I soon discovered, which we can go into in more depth afterwards. And thus began my journey. And people said to keep speaking out because Hugh and I are well known. We have two adopted children, and so many people would come up to me in the street saying, I would love to adopt, but I can't. It's just so hard. And that simple thing is like, my big thing is why. And I am a justice freak. When I see something that's not right, I do feel compelled. So it was, I'm not the sort of person that has to have an issue. There's some people that just go out there and need an issue just to sort of go out there and, fight the good fight. I wasn't looking for it. I just felt passionate that this was wrong, especially when I had travelled the world and I had seen this scenario. And when I saw all these people that wanted to take on the job of parenting a child that needed a family, I'm just like, hang on, why isn't this working? And I've had a long lesson in why it's not working.
So the paper reports Deborra-lee and her action group. You look around. Where's the action group? What happens next?
Yeah, there was no action lobby group. No, so it wasn't. So, and then my publicist, Victoria Buchan, just said she's not talking to anyone because all the press that have contacted me until she's spoken to the Prime Minister. I was like, oh my God, how'd I get here so quick? So the action lobby group came when I met the likes of you and like-minded people that stood up and could recognise that, yeah, you know what? This is not right. Children are not being served and we need to do something.
So I described you as an accidental social entrepreneur because you ended up then founding a social enterprise, in effect.
I guess. Well, I did, but I didn't. There was no structure to it. It wasn't like a planned, thought-out structure. It was an organic evolvement from a great need. And I just literally was winging it every step of the way. I mean, as you know, this organisation was run on the smell of a greasy rag. We didn't have funding. We didn't have a structure. We were sort of trying to gather a board together. I mean, we crawled, to become an entity and establish National Adoption Awareness Week.
So, Deb, you could say to accidentally found one social enterprise is
once is an accident.
It is an accident, and twice is downright careless. You went and did it again.
I know. I don't
America. So tell us, how did you go about founding a social enterprise in the United States, and what's that about?
See, that wasn't. In a way, it was an accident. Well, what happened is when I had the forum in Australia to speak at the press gallery down here about the history of adoption, which I gave a talk at the press gallery about the history of adoption and where we've come from and why we are where we are, which is not a very healthy place. And so I went, as I was living in New York, I went to as many informed people as I could find to be armed with information and knowledge and wisdom and facts so that I could present the argument. So when I was in New York, I gathered together a great group of people who work within the adoption community in Washington in Congress, and I had them educate me. So we were so successful in Australia as getting our message across and the awareness and bringing it back out of the cupboard after it's been literally for decades, as you know, just not talked about, pushed under the rug, nothing done about it. I feel that Adopt Change, we've been successful in putting so much energy into this. It's now on the table and we're addressing it and things are shifting. So I guess the Americans saw how successful we were down here, that they came to me and we had coffee, and it was just, I always feel you just get out of the way. I feel like I was a tool, just being used in a way, just get out of your way, because they came to me and we had a discussion. They said we want to do the same thing, and they tried with awareness and it hadn't worked. And at that same week that these people came to me to discuss creating something, I get a call from this young Australian guy who's new in New York. He's in advertising and he's seen the work that we've been doing in Australia, and he wants to put his hand up to help with a creative. So it was serendipitous that it all just came in. They came to me, he came to me, and I went, okay, let's go. And I have to preface this by saying when we started this, because it had been 10 years I'd been working in Australia, and it took everything out of me. It took a lot of energy and passion and drive and late hours. Obviously, I'm in New York and board meetings down here at different times. And I said, I'm happy to help, put this together. But it's a lot to run. So, of course, it evolved. So we went about doing the creative. This guy, Sam, came up with this fantastic creative, which we worked on and nuanced with all my adoption rock stars, as I call them, nuanced the messaging so that we had the right message. And then we slowly gathered a fantastic board together that came on, started with the fundraisers, and then I went to England. We couldn't find a CEO, and I think that is so important. The CEO who champions the organization, who runs it, is such an important piece. And I was not going to be content that we didn't have the perfect fit. So I was in Europe, and a friend of mine said, you must meet my brother in England, in London. I went and met this guy and had a 2-hour meeting with him. He was very happy in the north of England with his 2 kids and family, had a great job. And after 2 hours, I talked him into coming to New York and being the CEO. And he is the brother of Hugh Evans, who's headed up I'm sure you're aware, Hugh Evans is the Global Citizen Festival, which is happening in September again this year. He's created a movement of change around poverty, which I'm involved in also, because obviously that's a big reason why there are so many children that do become abandoned and are looking for families, is poverty. So
this organisation that you founded in America, it's called Hoagland.
Yes.
Can you tell me what it's about and why it has the name it has?
Hoagland has evolved from my education, I think. Because in Australia, I was addressing adoption, because that was the piece that was broken in Australia. That was people waiting 5 to 10 years. It's ridiculous, and the energy from the departments is not into making a system that works for everyone. So through all the work I did through adoption, I kept looking at the big picture. Hoagland is the big picture. Why are so many children abandoned or orphaned, even if they have living parents? Because many of these orphans have living parents, but they relinquish them in the hope that they have an education or find a better home, which is not okay. So I evolved my education at trying to get holistically at the root of the cause as to why there are so many kids, and that is poverty. It's mental health issues, it's dysfunctional families, it's maternal health, it's education in third world countries. of, if you do become pregnant, how you manage it, how you can keep your child, hopefully. So it's about going to the root cause and putting energy into making that work so that a child is not in the position that they have to be up for adoption. But adoption is a big part of the puzzle when it needs to be. As we know in Australia, in the foster care system, there I think is 40,000 kids who are permanently removed. Those children should not be stuck in the foster care system. They should be adopted.
Can you tell me, Deb, about your own personal journey? You mentioned, obviously, you've got two lovely kids in Oscar and Ava. What fired your passion for connecting children with permanent, loving families? I know you experienced, as did I, the system as it was at its worst, perhaps, in Australia.
I just don't think anyone... What does it feel like to be alone? I mean, you have a mum and dad who've got your back, who teach you right from wrong, all that stuff. And as I said, I travelled the world. I was in Cambodia looking at 2-year-olds sniffing glue. There's no adults around. There's children just left there. It's heartbreaking to me. So it was, I just can't tolerate the thought of a child not having someone there to protect them. And we know what can happen when there's no other adults around, the terrible things, that abuse and these children are so vulnerable to predators, and it's just such a heinous situation to me that I can't, knowing this, not speak out or try and do something. I just do my little bits, what I can do, which is hopefully just bring attention to it. That's what I can bring to it. So many people have different skill sets they can bring to it.
Deb, I'm not sure many people appreciate the gravitational force of your efforts as I describe it. You've really pulled into the cause some of the most powerful and passionate people in the world. And I'm thinking here about presidents, prime ministers. I'm thinking about Bill Clinton. I'm thinking about Tony Blair, Tony Abbott, Malcolm Turnbull, Hollywood, the rock stars. These many lesser known but incredibly qualified expert people in the child welfare field. How have you managed to get all of these people involved, and what's inspired you? Who among that galaxy of people that have come to the table have really kind of struck you as having just this incredible commitment to the passion to the cause?
Well, these are the people that can make a difference. Political, we know to shift anything, it's got to be with policy too. And you have political leaders at the helm. I'm in a position, unfortunately, I get to meet these people. Chelsea Clinton's a good friend of mine, and she was traveling in Africa with her father, and said, come as a part of the delegation. So I accepted that invitation. They were addressing all the Clinton Global Initiative stuff, but I wanted to, because I always hear, you hear third hand, oh, this is happening in Ethiopia with this orphanage, or there's this or that. And I thought, if I go, I can be in the villages. I can talk to the locals. I can see up close and personal what's really going on. So I accepted that. It was an amazing experience. I did 8 African countries in 6 days and traveled with President Clinton, who is a great storyteller at the buffet at night, let me tell you. President Clinton was the one who firstly changed the whole tone in America around adoption, and basically said, he created, I think it was 18 months or 9 months that the parents haven't been involved, then you lose rights. This child does have the chance to have a permanent loving family. He and Hillary Clinton that is part of their political agenda, is to make sure that adoption and foster care and kids out of family are looked after. He's a great leader. Tony Abbott obviously was our first Prime Minister that we spoke to, and we went through a few in Australia that saw the sense in it and took this on. I don't think Tony Abbott and his Chief of Staff, Peter Credlin, realised the complexities and how entrenched the bureaucracy was in not making change. So I think it was a shock to them too when they took on this and said, yeah, we're going to change it, how big a shift needed to happen. Tony Blair, he travels with his Faith Foundation. I directed his piece for his Faith Foundation. And he also travels the world and obviously is very involved with all the issues, and he's tried to hook me up with all the people in England. So I'm trying to make this an international, we've all got to we do need an international summit with all leaders from all over the world. As this needs to be, to me, what's more important than kids, the next generation? This needs to be a priority. I mean, in the UN goals, Family isn't even mentioned as part of one of the UN goals, which I find kind of shocking. But that's not a priority.
And I think in Australia we've still
Millennium Goals, sorry.
And we've still got the advocacy of the Deputy Prime Minister, and I think the Prime Minister, the new Prime Minister, not so new now, also continue to support the idea that adoption can be part of a modern family mix.
Absolutely, yeah. Malcolm Turnbull's on board, yeah.
This podcast typically concerns itself with the business of organisations needing to know their audiences and work out how to leverage technology to get an advantage. And I often think in the not-for-profit world, it's almost every bit as competitive as what, in this sort of cause-related marketplace as it is in the business world for organisations to stand out. So I was really interested to hear from you how you've gone about building an audience and growing these businesses.
See, I should have a really good answer for that. And as you said, I'm accidental, so I think I fall more into it. You know what you do? Delegation. I surround myself with a team of people who work in social media, such as yourself and such as my PR people, that know how to leverage all the Instagrams and the FaceTimes and the Snapchats and all that stuff, and how to get that message out there. So I think I think that's what you have to do, know your strength and utilize those, and then outreach, delegation to the people that know how to work it.
You and the Adopt Change team have managed to attract the likes of the Packer and Pratt Family Foundations as supporters. Mm-hmm. And I was very interested to hear Sam Lipsky from the Pratt Foundation say that, like any investor, for him it was as much about the passion of the team and its ability to get things done as it was the cause. Mm-hmm. Did that surprise you, that's the...
Well, I think, hey, you look at the Pratt Foundation, they're being hit on by everyone that, needs to get funding. So they're not silly. So I think that they can see authenticity and they can see passion and people who really do want to make a difference, as to people who are just jobbing out there doing it. I think passion counts for so much, sometimes even over expertise and skill. If you have a passion, it's like necessity is the mother of invention. You want to get to that end goal, your passion can drive you, and you do get creative along the way, which is what I had to do. I had no experience with boards. I had no experience with organizations or any of this. I literally am the accidental. I love that you give me that title, because I was tripping and falling more times than not, through this whole experience.
You mentioned social media before, and I was going to ask you how significant you think the rise of digital technology is in the world of social enterprise. I checked this week and noticed Hugh now has 22.7 million Facebook likes, I think. So I suppose inside your household, you know better than most the magnification power of this.
It's extraordinary. I find it both fabulous and terrifying.
Yes.
We could go into that. That could be another podcast.
Indeed. Part of the art of founding an organisation is, I assume, like a business, that you want to create momentum, but also hope that there'll be life after you've got the thing going, that it's not always going to be dependent on your own personal efforts and labour. Have you thought much about the succession plans and how to, what the role is of these organisations once the founder has done his or her job?
And I think that's knowing, it's like a relationship, it's knowing when to get in, when to get out, and when you can maximise, because in this area, as I'm sure you're aware, major burnout with people who it takes a lot to sustain that passion, that drive, and the minutiae of running an organisation. So I think visionaries and founders and people who create these things need to come in and give their all, and know when it's time to extricate and to transition into it being a working organisation that gets on with the job.
So Deb, for you, obviously you're loving living in New York. You schooled there and came back, and it's such an exciting city. You've now got a place down the road here in Bondi, a lot of travel in between, and then there's of course the core business of acting and directing. Yes. What's next for you guys?
Slowing down. What's next for us? I really do feel, we use the word passion. I am trying to be smart about choosing my passions, and I'm probably getting back more to my artistic core, which is I'm very creative and love my art. And I think when we are honest with ourselves and we're doing what we should be doing in that moment, I think everyone benefits. I think that the ripple effect of being true to yourself, being authentic and doing what you want to do has a ripple effect to affect not only your family and your friends, but the world at large. I think there's a lot to be said about joy and happiness and peace in creating that energy.
So it's about living in the moment for a bit.
Yeah, really organically following what my heart is telling me to do.
Finally, if you reflected back over the decade or so that you've been involved now in these social enterprises, what would be the most significant things you think you've learned in that time as you've sort of reflected on the whole journey of founding, mobilising the passion, affecting the policy, bringing together these teams of people to work to your championing of a cause?
I think it was Margaret Mead's famous quote. You always think that it's, you think you want to change something, but it's so overwhelming, it's so big, and it's governments and it's big and you can't do anything. I think she said it just takes one sort of impassioned citizen to make a shift. And I think it taught me that just by sort of standing up for what you truly believe and then having the unity of others who are like-minded join in that scenario, that it does create energy, which in turn creates change. We've seen the change happen. I think that has just been the most thrilling thing for me. Like, it taught me, wow. And I think when I started out, I was just like angry that it was so, and it was an injustice, and I didn't really foresee that you actually could make a difference. And I think this has taught me that, yeah, anyone, anywhere, just by believing and being passionate can really make a difference.
Deborra-lee, thank you.
You're welcome.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of Customers Matter. We encourage you to subscribe and, if you like it, rate and review it. Head over to commotion.com/podcast. That's KOMOSION.com/podcast.